Okay. Third thing, we are recording the session. So by staying here or online, it's a consent. Opt out if you wish to opt out. And it's a great pleasure to have Dr. Nikki Zar chairing the second session. Nikki.
Hi, good afternoon. No?
לא, זה רק מיקי נפגש.
אני לא נפגשתי.
לא, לא.
So, good afternoon, and for our first session, now we have Mrs. Birnhack from the School of Communication at Hadassah University. She will present her work with Professor Haim, who's not here tonight, and so if you have PhD candidate. No, not anymore.
In between.
Okay. And she's studying morning and commemoration practices on social media sites. So,
Thank you. Right. So, hi everyone. I'm glad to be here, and I will be presenting a piece of our work about Facebook memorial pages. I kind of have the feeling that it takes a different direction from the previous session that we had, and it was very, very interesting. But I hope it's just gonna offer like a different perspective instead of the right to be forgotten, about the right to be remembered, and how users and humans perceive this right to be remembered. So I will start by saying a few words about the background of this study, because this study is basically part of my dissertation, in which I examined mourning and memorialization practices among Facebook users. And in my dissertation, I have found multiple practices in which users mediate and communicate mourning and memorialization, but I also found something interesting about the platform itself, about Facebook as the platform. I have noticed that users do not really organize their practices, but instead these practices are organized in a systematic manner, according to Facebook's internal logic and infrastructure. So when we speak of Facebook, we usually speak of it as one single platform. But in fact, Facebook is a complex, multifunctional platform that includes several communication channels. So I examined profiles, groups, and pages, but there is also Messenger and the marketplace, maybe. These are all distinct communication channels within Facebook that have different goals from the start, and therefore they have crucially different affordances, and they allow different social dynamics and different practices. So as part of my research, I conceptualized these distinct communication channels as sub-platforms, and I outlined a spectrum that ranges from profiles to pages, and accordingly from the personal and more private sphere of communication to the public sphere. In the context of mourning and memorialization, this spectrum moves from the personal sphere of mourning to a larger and more institutional sphere of memorialization. This panoramic perspective enables me to conceptualize the various practices that I observed. So as you can see here, profiles afford two main practices: the creation of personal mourning logs on the bereaved's profile, and online morning guest books on the deceased profile. In both cases, however, the dominant communicative function is emotive or expressive, and the focus is on self-expression. The group's sub-platform offers a communal quality and combines self-expression with some more public aspects such as group organizing group events, etc. And then finally, on the right side of the spectrum, we can see pages that come to serve as online memorialization centers. So I was very intrigued by this specific practice, and after the first panoramic study, I delved into the study of Facebook memorial pages. So very briefly about pages. Pages are the original or official aim of pages is to serve businesses, organizations, or public figures who seek to increase their digital presence. Therefore, pages are visible to anyone on Facebook by default. They don't have privacy settings at all, and they may have an unlimited number of followers, and we should know that it's followers. The terminology is followers and not friends, as in profiles, or members, as in Facebook groups. And the content on pages is strictly controlled by their admins. So followers, visitors, and other users are unable to post directly on pages. And interestingly, despite this official aim and policy of Facebook, users adapt pages to their own needs and utilize these unique affordances to mourn and memorialize and publicize ordinary people. So in our study, we examined 18 such cases, memorial pages that were created in memory of ordinary people who died in non-ordinary circumstances. For example, a woman who was murdered by her male partner, a high school student who committed suicide, fallen soldiers, etc. And none of these commemorated individuals were known publicly or public figures before the death. Between 2018 and 2021, I conducted ethnographic fieldwork based on the principles of digital ethnography that highlights media affordances, contextual layers, and the question of online-offline dynamics. And our findings show that Facebook memorial pages function not only in a memorialization capacity, but also as social capital resources. We point at a set of practices that users employ to manage this process, and we argue that it is a step-by-step process that users acknowledge and pursue. So the first step is to create a relevant and engaging page, and then to reach a large audience. And then a very important point in this process is the emergence of a network. When the audience turns into a network, it is kind of a turning point, and admins play a major role in this turn, and they then put a great effort to develop and maintain their relationship with the network and community. So according to our findings, this process involves technical or technological practices that have to do with the way that admins interact with the platform or sub-platform affordances, and also discursive practices that relate to the way admins interact with their network and audience. These two types of practices are interrelated, as you can see, they're intertwined, and they even may blend sometimes. So I just want to show an example of that. These screenshot is the display that users get to see when creating a page. And in the text box that you can see here, users have to define a category that describes what type of business, organization, or topic the page represents. These are Facebook words that request the user to choose a category. And users can type freely in this text box while receiving help from Facebook in the shape of popped up categories according to the letters that the user types. And these ideas may seem like helpful suggestion from Facebook, but these are not really suggestion, and the user must choose one of these pre-existing options and pre-existing categories. So as part of the ethnography of affordances, I went to, to study this specific feature of pages category, and the list of available categories that Facebook offers is very detailed. It comprises over 1,500 possibilities, which includes, for example, 15 subcategories of pet services and 28 different types of Chinese restaurants. But surprisingly, none of these categories or subcategories relate somehow to memorialization. So I think this finding by itself raises some very interesting questions as to how Facebook carefully selects and forms pages, categories, and uses, and how do users act within this framework of affordances. And in the case of memorial pages, which categories they employ in practice. So my findings point to three main categories: community, public figure, and interest. Based on Facebook official list, as you can see, the public figure category refers to an actor, author, scientist, etc. And the interest category includes sports, visual arts, and the like. But in the case of memorial pages, the meaning of these categories is negotiated. They do not reflect the meaning Facebook provides, but instead the meaning that the interpretations that users ascribe in line with their goals to engage interest in the page, to create a large community that recognizes and remembers the deceased, and to turn the deceased into a public figure. This finding demonstrates an interactional view of affordances as a relationship or negotiation between the user and the interface, rather than merely a property or a feature of the interface itself. Furthermore, it demonstrates that users are well aware of their goals. They know what they wish to achieve through the page, and they strategically lead this process from the very early stages of creating and naming and categorizing the page. On the next stage, after the page was created successfully, admins put great efforts to gain followers. They repeatedly and explicitly request the audience to like and share the page with their friends. These requests usually appear along with a short account or reminder of the importance of the page and the importance of this action. This post here is taken from a page in the memory of Police Assistant Commissioner Eitan Bar, who committed suicide following an investigation that he was under. The admin of the page is his daughter, who often signs posts as Daddy's Girl. And here she writes, "You're all invited to like and share the page in memory of our father. So no one will forget this angel who wholeheartedly gave his life to the country." So in this example and in many others, the admin used the conjunction word "so" to form a causal connection between online participatory actions, like, share, follow, and cognitive or emotive implications, such as recognition, memory, and esteem. So the basic assumption here is a strong link between visible and measurable online engagement and cognitive or emotive implication. Based on this assumption, admins try to maintain an ongoing activity on the page. They use the publicity of pages as a sub-platform and their network of followers to produce multiple initiatives and events, both online and offline. Admins address the followers with requests for resources and participatory actions, physical attendance in memorial event, volunteering and helping in producing these events, purchasing memorial merchandise, donating money, a lot of money. So the social capital resources are sometimes translated into economic capital. And finally, admins routinely express their gratitude and show their appreciation to the followers and their engagement. They highlight the importance of these actions and discursively position their followers, who are otherwise strangers, as vital partners in this process. Thanks to you, we achieved the goal. With every passing day, the help we received grew greater and greater. Thanks to you, to your shares, your devotion, more than 100,000 shekels were raised in the last couple of days for the commemoration of Oren. We're grateful for having such partners as yourselves. This discursive positioning or repositioning as partners is a significant status promotion for the followers, which is pursued against the official affordances and hierarchical terminology of Facebook, in which there are admins who produce the content and followers who consume it. So by symbolically upgrading the followers to the status of partners, admins imbue the followers with a sense of significance and importance and enhance their commitment and engagement with the page. In this way, they create what I call an encouragement engagement circle to encourage the followers to contribute more likes, more content, more resources, and more engagement. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Susie. Now we will have to our commentator, Professor Oren Meir, from the Department of Communication in the University of Haifa.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Micha, and thank you, Tal, for inviting me to this fascinating workshop. As I saw on the topics that are going to be discussed, and furthermore, as I participated in the actual workshop that deals with the issue of those who might be interested in our digital remains after we die. I was reminded of the Hanoch Levin's quote, "Echnoch is a famous Israeli playwright," might be the motto for the next workshop. Start in Hebrew. "Imi lo masika oti karega, ani etrakez ba kshetamut." My mother doesn't bother me, it doesn't interest me that much, but now I'll focus on her after she dies. So maybe that could be doing. Okay, so thank you, Sarit and Chaim, for the opportunity to read this fascinating paper. I'd like to offer two comments or remarks regarding the conceptualization and methodology of social media ethnographies and the interface between these two levels of exploration, between conceptualization and methodological work. First observation regards the algorithmic black box, or rather the algorithm is the elephant in the famous fable. I'm sure you're all acquainted with the story about the group of blind men who never came across an elephant, and they have to learn what an elephant is, so while they cannot actually see it, but rather only touch various parts of the elephant. In the methodology section, Sarit and Chaim write, and I quote, "We conducted multiple searches, which led us to different lists of pages. To further offset Facebook's unknown algorithmic preferences, we did not always sample the pages from the top of the result list. This quote-unquote unknown algorithmic preference is undoubtedly the great white whale of social media studies." I'm mixing the mammals-based metaphors. And this is evident all through the paper, as it is evident in the work of all of us who study online communication and especially social media communication. The white whale of the quote-unquote unknown algorithmic preference surfaces again in the article when it comes to the admins whose activities stand at the heart of this study. Just like us researchers, the admins never know for sure what pleases the algorithmic whale, and thus they are destined to constantly try various tactics that might yield extended exposure to the various publics that they're trying to attract. A quick comparison might be helpful in illuminating the scope and nature of this conceptual and methodological challenge. Chaim and I are members of a dissertation committee of a brilliant student in this university from the communication department who studies the use of symmetry tombstones as means of communication. Not sure what the banging is. They call the neighbors from the upstairs. Okay, so the student is studying the use of cemetery tombstones as means of communication. So this is a research project that in many ways parallels Sarit's and Chaim's project. And yet, in the tombstones case, the actual physical tombstones case, the rules and regulations of what can appear on physical tombstones in Israeli cemeteries are available to researchers. Also, there is no quote-unquote unknown algorithmic preference that dictates the movement of visitors in the cemetery, and you can freely observe the patterns of movement across the cemetery. And so I would like to suggest that an integral part in every current social media ethnography should be a discussion of the epistemic limitations created by the algorithmic elephant or whale. Our studies need to acknowledge what we know and what we cannot know about the social media interactions we're exploring. A second point that is illuminated by this interesting paper and bears significance to those of us who study social media regards the intersection between the public and private spheres within the data, as well as the intersection between the private and public spheres within the context of analyzing the data. When I first went over the page 4 table that details the specific information about the 18, I think, individuals memorialized in the studied pages, I naturally wanted to access the pages. I started looking for the Hebrew names of those people, but could not find them on Facebook. But since the deaths of some of those individuals received some media coverage, I was able to track some of the actual names of the memorialized individuals. At first, I thought I located a typo or a glitch in the study. So Osnat Shemesh from the table is actually Omer Shemesh. Gal Levy from the table is actual Guy Levy, and so on. After I realized these are not incidental mistakes, I contacted Sarit and Chaim, and if I got it right, this was a sort of a compromise reached with the editors of the journal who demanded that the names of the memorialized individuals would be anonymized. I must admit, I never encountered this sort of halfway anonymization. In a sense, this decision highlights the gradual and complex adaptation of the logics of traditional quantitative research, and more specifically, traditional ethnography, to the context and affordances of social media. As the authors correctly argue, the activity on the memorial pages, and that's something just demonstrated, the activities on the memorial pages in their sample possess a distinct public quality. Actually, this is what defines them. They're public and they're intended to be public. Moreover, one of the fundamental purposes of establishing such Facebook pages is to attract the attention of wandering Facebook users who were not acquainted with the memorialized person. Same way, a random tombstone from the dissertation I just mentioned might attract the attention of a cemetery visitor on her way to the grave she was planning to visit. All of this points to the nuanced relations between the Facebook page and the academic journal page. Do the wishes of the page's admins count? Should they count? As demonstrated time and again in the paper, the admins would clearly like the full names with the correct spelling and the life stories of their loved ones to be better known in public
And they would definitely hope the readers of this paper, like me, would show interest in the studied memorial pages. In such a case, who is actually protected by anonymization and what is lost by such a policy? Moreover, would similar anonymization standards apply to names engraved on physical tombstones in a physical cemetery referenced in an academic journal? Thank you.
So we still do a comment.
I just want to say thank you, and I like the term halfway anonymization. That's a really good point. And with the review process of this paper, I get to think about it a lot, about this halfway anonymization and about anonymization in general. And I think a lot of people in this room are like privacy experts, that they can say something better than me, I guess. Because I'm a social media researcher, so everything in terms of privacy is related to research ethics. And when I think of the people that I want to protect, I mean, everything, the discussion here was about the need to protect users from the tech companies, from the platforms, from, and here we should protect them maybe from researchers that, you know, want to use their full names in their article, and maybe this would reveal their story that might be interpreted in certain ways that are unwanted and things like that. So I'm not sure about that. It's the review process, and your feedback just gave me a lot of food for thought, and I hope to, if you have any other comments and will shed light on that, I would be happy to hear that.
So thank you. I really enjoyed the paper, and I have a question, maybe a little bit outside the scope of the paper, but something that perhaps we can learn from it. So as I was reading it, I was wondering what transformed death and grief from the private arena to the public arena, because as you also mentioned, we typically think of grief as something that we do with people that knew the deceased, right? And what we see on what you're describing is a far more public experience of death. And I was wondering, what is the element that transforms it? And from your table one in the paper, it seems like the very strong indicator would be the cause of death, right? So how people die. So I think that's a really interesting theoretical conclusion, but also it seems that some people talk about, you know, my parent had a strong contribution to the community, but it seems like the strongest element would be the cause of death. And I'm wondering, yeah,
absolutely. Thank you for this comment. Absolutely, yes, I agree. I also noted as part of the literature review that Walter, back then in 1990 something, termed the concept of public mourning, and he referred to mourning of either public figures that, you know, were celebrities in their life, or people that the cause of death was public in a way that, you know, changed their story and turned it into a public, resulted in public mourning. So I think the cause of death is absolutely the, you know, number one indicator for these kind of transformations. And I think that something that I just noticed, but I still need to, you know, to go more deeply about that different causes, different stories. Let's say fallen soldiers, they have their patterns. You know, it's much more about sacrificial discourse and heroism. I guess it also depends on the cultural aspect, but the cause of death is not like a flat category. The cause of death might be tragic, as in, you know, high school student that committed suicide. It might be something that heroic. It might be different, and then different causes affect the discourse and the development of different online memorialization centers. But the shared idea is that they all bear shared values, collective values, justice and patriotism and let's say, feminism, human rights or things like that. And then the admins can make use of this system of values and shared beliefs to enhance and utilize the story to create these kind of pages. But I couldn't find any page, like memorial page, that is dedicated to the death of a loved grandma that just passed away in the age of 90, healthy, left behind a full family and everything. No, these are not the stories of pages. These are stories of Facebook groups that the whole family members are gathered together to create an album and celebrate her life on an annual event, things like that. So the whole discourse is different, the whole and the sub-platform is different. So yes, thank you.
Can I just, before that, just to follow up, and it should be short one, but can't you make it the other way around? Because for me to maybe just it's a justification to be able to create a profile on pages and not in community or private profiles. So if you have like a very sexy cause of death, maybe you can have a profile in pages. So I don't know, I'm not sure which way. I mean, I think that you can make it the other way around.
I'm not sure I understood your question. I meant to say that the cause. I'm not sure I understood your question. What I was trying to say is that the cause of death is sometimes it's the story, but it's sometimes the justification to create a page and not just the profile. Not to stay with these regular profiles that they used to own when they were alive. Yes.
So
Thanks. Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed reading the paper, even though it was some time ago, so I might have missed what I'm going to ask. So apologies if I did. The first one is actually just a short comment about the categories and the lack of memorialization as a category. I wonder what Facebook would respond with regards to that question, and if they would say, "Oh, we've got the memorialization policy, so we didn't think that we should put it in the pages," or something like that. I don't know. I'm just assuming, and I assume you don't know either. But the question about, and I think it builds on what the previous questions asked about the cause of death. And as far as I remember, most of your admins were anonymous.
The admins
Yes.
have
Or
them.
not half, or
Have exactly.
yeah, okay, so quite a few of them are anonymous.
Yes.
So I would be really curious to see to unpick their self-interest here, and now building onto the commodification paper and what we'll hear later from Marisa in terms of commodifying continuing bonds. This is obviously not the case here because it's not continuing bonds, it's the strangers who have never had any bonds with the deceased, and they just come on board through the engagement with the page. But I wonder if in this case, and this is just my very naive assumption, is that the self-interest of some of the admins at least would lie in commodifying the cause of death or something around that, and then earning some money from, as you said, selling some merchandise. And that was really interesting when I read it from your paper, because it's something completely new to me.
So thank you for the questions. I think in half of the cases, they were self-identified as family members. Mother, sister or partner or something like that. In half of the cases, that's I can say. About the other half, I am not sure. My only guess from the post and the observations is that they are not totally strangers, although we do know from other research that totally strangers do create and maintain a memorial page. But I want to add something about what you said. On pages, you have the about section, and you can see, you used to see on this about section the admins of the page as team members under the title of team members, but they updated the version, and now they add a page transparency title, but they somehow removed the identity of admins. So you can no longer see their profile or their names, but just the primary location, the country in which they are located, the admins. So it's much more vague and Pages admins is it's a thing, you know. I mean, it's not clear. My only guess is that they do have a connection. They are relatives or friends or something like that, and it's not just about economic capital, but yes, selling merchandise. It's not like it's sort of like an industry. It's massive selling. It's not something that is like a boutique. So
two points that I would like to raise. The link to what Adina was asking, I think, in a different way. We talk about social capital, and we often talk about the light economy. So I was wondering about the commodification of death and mourning, but not in the kind of the financial sense, not in the monetary sense, but in terms of the social capital. How does it help build a stronger capital for the admins, and whether there is a sense of use or abuse of mourning for generating this capital. So there is a sense of I need to encourage other people to like my my page, and therefore I think tell me something about the value, the self value of the hive, or the value of the deceased. So I wondered about this. If there is a sense of commodification in the bad way of these pages, and also to kind of link it back to the previous session, did you see anything that relates to the consent of the deceased people to become these death celebrities, become these public figures post-death?
I'm not sure I understood the second question.
The people that have died,
Yes.
they become the center of a memorial page. Their commemoration is public. Do the people that are in charge of the commemoration have considered the consent of the people to become these public figures?
No, there was an assumption that they would probably want their legacy to be present online. I didn't have a chance to see something like that. That's interesting. But as for the first question about likes economy, I think it's also relates to your question because it's interesting when we think of social capital. Usually, it relates to the capital that the individual accumulate for himself. But here, when half of the admins are not even known, we don't even aware what their names, who they are. So I'm wondering what kind of capital they accumulate. But according to the definitions of social capital, so practical support and information and also emotional support, because they declare that they gain support and social support and emotional support, and they feel like they are hugged. We just read that. So they do accumulate social support, and I think that also another point is that this social capital is translated to economic capital, as I showed. So maybe it's just a sense of meaning, sense of meaning and importance, and maybe something that is comfort. But I was trying to, in this study particularly, I was trying to, move from the scope of relief and comfort and things like that to a new perspective of social capital and something that is more like objective, what they gain.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm from the privacy clinic here at Birnhack. First of all, I want to thank you. It was a very, very interesting article. It was particularly interesting because one of the names that was changed, like Professor mentioned, used to be a friend of mine from elementary school who fell and got strip. And I wondered, is this a strange coincidence that everything written down is the same? And that led to me remembering the funeral that was held for him, which he wrote had 3,500 people who came to the funeral. Most of them did not know him personally, but they did met him in several several stations in his life. And one of the things that came through the article and generally in my experience with a particular person was the reappropriation of the persona and data of the person who deceased for the benefit of the living. Like was mentioned here, in their consent to do this. And you said that it was implied that they have the consent. Personally, I don't think that Bar especially had consent to that, but it's understood, at least in the concept of fallen soldiers, that their consent is not relevant for the collective. And I would think that an article specifically spelled out in English, written down in English, it would be important perhaps to explain the cultural background of fallen soldiers in Israel particularly, and perhaps the collective importance of remembrance in Judaism, which is very prevalent in this article. Aside from this, it is slightly different than the other articles that are written down here. It was very interesting to read, a very, very positive experience for me. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I would just like to point, one of our Zoom people has Ian Brewer, apologies if I mispronounced the name, mentions that he has built, or they have built, a platform called Forever Mortal, where families can reconnect with their deceased loved ones in ways never seen before. And there's, so you can, I think it's a link to LinkedIn, I'm not sure. Forever Mortal for those interested in that.
Okay, so I think you want to say something.
I just want to thank you. You gave me a lot of. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, for the invitation, and the opportunity to be here and feedback and
Thank
your
you.
comments. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes.
So now we're gonna move on to our next panel. And here we have Mauricio Figueroa from Newcastle University Law School, and Mauricio is a PhD at the law school. He studies postmortem privacy and digital medicines, right? And he will present his study on affection as a service.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael and Tal, for organizing this. I feel very touched being here again within the walls of the Bauman Faculty of Law. I started here a couple of years ago as an LLM student, and it was actually under Michael's guidance and his classes that I discovered a lot of elements that are out there in the intersection of law and the society. And because of him, I met my current PhD supervisor in Newcastle, who is Lillian. And also here as well is Irina, who is my external supervisor. So in a certain way, this is like an exam for me. I want to discuss with you this work in progress. So in Newcastle University, I am studying analyzing ghostbots. So what's a ghostbot? I call ghostbot a conversational agent, a chatbot based on a deceased person. So for instance, once someone dies, somebody takes that information from messages, likes, pictures, conversation, emails, they put that information in a system and they create a chatbot. So in that regard, one can reconnect with someone who has died. One can have a conversation, artificial, very superficial conversation, still a conversation with an artificial agent that resembles or appears to be that the loved one who has died. And believe it or not, in the last couple of years, it's not only like the startups who are like taking interest in this, also big companies such as, for example, Microsoft or even Amazon, they have expressed interest in moving forward this potential industry. So what I'm doing in my PhD is analyzing the legal institutions implied on ghostbots. So, for example, privacy, artificial intelligence regulation, tort, even issues of copyright and so forth. And this paper is not a condensed version of what I'm working on my thesis. This paper goes, let's say, one step below. It's my theoretical understanding of what's going on, why ghostbots exist, what's being taken from by the industry from us, and how ghostbots are being commercialized, let's say. And as you can tell, this is like a very odd and creepy product, right? I mean, why would we like to do it? But for some reason, people are buying into this, into these products and services. So what I pretend to explain in this paper is that the market has created a new stream of services and products. This is what I call what I take from scholars Luciano Floridi and Carl Oman as the digital afterlife industry. We have a huge section of services and products and different providers who are profiting from mourning in digital spaces. And one of these new products is precisely ghostbots. So what I say is that ghostbots represent a form of commodification. So I start this paper by explaining what's commodification in a very similar way as Mustafa was explaining quasi-property. I think it's very important to express what do we mean by commodification. So by commodification, I state that I understand this process of bringing something outside the market into the market. And commodification has been there for ages. For example, think of land, right? Land was taken into the market, and then we have created, after it was commodified, we have created real estate or property. Think, for example, of arts, of singing, of dancing. We have taken that into the market and we have created entertainment, the industry of entertainment. Even people refer to the commodification of sex, taking sex into the market and you create prostitution, right? So in the context of death, of mourning, I claim that these companies in the digital space are taking precisely these elements, these affective bonds, and they are taking those into a chatbot and therefore are profiting from that relationship. And this is complicated because Irina mentioned this already. There are too many theories in psychology studies. The first one is that when someone died, or relationship with that person ceases to exist, it perishes, it doesn't matter anymore, is very rooted in Freud theories and so forth. And the other theory, which is what has been discussed here, is the continuing bonds. That is, we still have a continuing relationship with those people who have died. That's why we go to cemeteries. That's why we make memorial pages. That's why we have Facebook groups. That's why we go to diaries. We keep like albums and pictures and so forth, right? So I think, and this is my my contribution in this paper, that ghostbots are affecting continuing bonds in a very interesting way. First, because they are precisely intervening in this relationship between us, let's say the living and the dead that we have, by creating this artificial agent and allowing us to have this conversation with someone who is, of course, not that person, but has commodified those elements. And think, for example, of what's the data that is coming into the ghostbot, right? Those are like conversations, like your first experience, you name it, in the army, the first song that you love the most, the memories that you have, the birthday that you have enjoyed the most, and so forth. So these are not like public things, you know. These are things that are highly shaped by our relationship with others, our families, our friends, our partners. So what I consider is that in a certain way, the market has gained a new terrain, a new field to profit from mourning, from grieving in digital spaces, which is the emergence and the commercialization of those things. And of course, this is highly complicated to explain at first, because we know let's say that we are not having a conversation with that real person, that this is just like a computer program or software. But once you are like interacting with this person, and depending on the technology that you're using, of course, it can be like a very real conversation. For example, imagine that after a couple of years, people could use, for example, something as ChatGPT 3 for creating a ghost bot based on someone. It will be a much more reliable conversation, right? So you will be affecting more this process of grieving, of moving forward, and also for remembering the death. So in that regard, I think it's challenging on its own, and this is what I want to discuss in depth in my doctoral studies, like the legal institutions and the way to regulate the systems. But for now, and at this point, and in this paper, I want to make clear that I consider this to be a very aggressive form of commodification, and a very troubling form of commodification of something very intimate, and at the same time, something very natural, which is our death, right? So basically, that's it.
So, thank you, Mauricio. And now, we're going to our commentator, Professor Riva from the Department of Communication in the University of Haifa. And, what he says to be more, not care. I really would love that.
So, thank you for this really thought-provoking paper. So I will read, not unlike Black Mirror, the science fiction series it refers to, this paper offers a glimpse into the near future, or perhaps the eerie present, by exploring a couple of apps that offer simulacra of communication with the dead. These services study aspects of their life clients, individuals concerned about their posthumous legacy, in order to create avatars that their bereaving loved ones will be able to communicate with after the clients themselves have died. The paper developed several legal arguments considering this emerging technology, focusing in particular on the conditions under which personality may be sold, and asking whether identity could be regarded as property. As a qualitative communication scholar, I commend the paper for introducing ethnographic insights into legal theorization. Specifically, it draws on the study of intimacy to argue that its commodification, or what it terms affection as a service, is, quote, disturbing and socially unpleasant. I'd like to reflect on this uneasiness from three interrelated perspectives. First, to rehash the old, although admittedly weak argument, that there is not much that is new about the commodification of intimate relationships. Second, to situate the commodification of the dead in a broader context of the commodification of much of our digital life and living. And last, to consider the notion of commodification as it is outlined in the paper. Based on these diachronic, synchronic, and conceptual arguments, I will suggest as a conclusion that this most recent technological commodification of intimacy, albeit uncanny, does not require legal intervention. So the first point is that people have always paid for intimacy and intimate services, that people have long felt the need to communicate with the dead, and they're often willing to pay for it. Marriage is a contractual agreement, so is foster care, so is surrogacy. All involve a transfer of money in exchange for intimate relations. The paper posits, and I quote, traditional separation between the market and family that is now being eroded. But as sociologists Hadassah and FAUs have shown, children have only recently become priceless and the construction of the home as a private haven of intimacy is a capitalist modernist development. Indeed, for the greater part of history, and specifically under patriarchy, the family had an economic value and intimacy came with a price tag. Further studies show that death does not terminate intimate relationship. People did in the past and continue to this day to write wills that, after they're dead, affect the living, as we discussed here. They have authored memoirs and journals and created scrapbooks and photo albums and commissioned paintings of themselves or their deceased loved ones. People also seek services of mediums who channel or communicate with the dead, as did King Saul when visited the medium of Endor, asking her to conduct a seance for him, despite his official prohibition on such ungodly practices. So, while the fact that practices were acceptable in the past does not necessarily legitimate them in the present, it does suggest that it was not digital technology that spawned the commodification of intimate relations. And thus, it is not the digital manifestations of this commodification of death that we need to be concerned about, if at all. The second point is that people today engage with a multitude of applications that provide them some value in return for personal information they provide, and that these apps commodify their identity and relationship. The expanding category of self-tracking apps from Fitbit onwards allows users to gain self and other knowledge by quantifying their bodily activity and sharing that information. Pregnancy apps that my student analyzes invite women to upload both data and sonograms and week-by-week belly photos in exchange for a social comparative view of their progression. And possibly more explicitly than others, dating apps encourage users to provide detailed descriptions of their physical attributes, their work and leisure preferences, and their sexual, matrimonial, and family desires in whatever elusive Dan Cotillard term scopic capitalism. Specifically, hookup apps lure users to self-brand themselves and advertise personal information in order to enter a meat market with a probabilistic hope of finding a mate. However, this like economy is the cultural and technical logic that undergirds the entire web. Platforms from Facebook to LinkedIn and from YouTube to Reddit, gaming apps and online communities are all in the business of producing and trading connections and emotions, be it outrage, nostalgia, or romantic love, for the sake of engagement. So, while the fact that people are regularly involved in apps that commodify their identity, practices, and desires does not mean that some apps did not raise more concern than others, it does suggest that we need to explicate why death apps are particularly worrisome when commodification is what the web is now about. The third and last point, concerns the notion of commodification, which is derived from the work of Morse and George Lucas. As mentioned, the paper finds the commodification of identity and relationships disturbing, and I think that indeed it is. For example, Luz and Cotillard highlight the similarity in the ways in which algorithms and Tinder users are made to see people. When users adopt a fast, binary, post-lingual, and post-narrative sociality that is designed for algorithms. Luz and Cotillard draw on Maurizio Lazzarato to conclude that when humans are mediated through algorithms, they lose their subjectivity and, like slaves, they become individuals. This invites a return to Orjona Padurais' volume, The Social Life of Things, which is cited in the paper. Since in chapter 2 of that book, Igor Kopitov reflects on his ethnographic study of slavery, arguably the most extreme form of human commodification. Kopitov promotes a biographical processual interpretation based on his observation that even the commodification of the slave is followed by what he terms singularization or re-individuation, which may or may not lead to the slave's recommodification. Kopitov notes, no system is everything so singular as to preclude even the hint of exchange. And in no system is everything a commodity and exchangeable for everything else within a unitary sphere of exchange. Indeed, and I quote again, although the singular and the commodity are opposites, no thing ever quite reaches the ultimate commodity end of the continuum between them. So there aren't any simple distinction between humans and things, between the singular and the commodifiable. Kopitov, I believe, calls for a reasoned explication of those commodifications we feel are morally or culturally obnoxious and require interventions, and those which do not.
So thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you so much. First of all, I really appreciate that you have taken the time to write down all these comments. Be sure I will be going over your comments on my paper, because there's a lot of things that I consider highly valuable. There's like a couple of things. Like first, I appreciate what you said. I don't consider that I went as far as incorporated ethnographic contributions, but I make an effort because here we are we're together as scholars from different disciplines, and as you know, sometimes legal scholars, we are very hard, very rigid, and we don't care as much of the actual phenomenon. So what I try by incorporating those elements or those insights is like putting those legal narratives in context to exemplify how they play out in real life. And what you said is true. I mean, we have an issue with communicating with death, you name it, with fire. People use fire to communicate with the dead. When the telephone emerged, we use like the telephone we use like certain noises, or we will hear like certain noises, we will ascribe those noises to the death. With a TV appear, if you will see like blue lights or something, you will see that it was like a spirit, or something being there. The problem here is that it was never as precise as now, that you have this data which is granular, which is so specific, which is so truthful in the sense that it's created by the own diseased person. So I think that's the first part that makes causal problematic. And the second part has to do with these issues of commodification that you have mentioned, which I agree with, are slightly different to the commodification in digital spaces. Why, for example, we have discussed here a lot the commodification of data. First, of course, we have repealed the idea that data has a price, right? But the digital environment allows you to data mine in different ways to conceal these activities. You have that data mining, you put that in a model, you have profiling in the software. So in that regard, this is the same. I mean, you have the data, and then you create apparently a software engine, a conversational agent, sorry, which appears to be like an innovation or possibly an artistic construction, right? But in the end, you are trying to commodify those things. And of course, I mean, I'm not saying that the rest of the debating commodification, the law and society is not relevant. I think this is just this is a piece of a wider picture. And in the end, I think that the answer is not that these elements, this goes what's per se should be regulated as such, but how does the law cope with this phenomenon, and how does the law fall short or is able to place those possible harms or abuses, whatever we want to call it, into a certain legal frame or not. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. The fascinating topic. I think we're all we share. I think we're all disturbed about this kind of phenomenon, but I wonder if for the same reason. So I think kind of putting the evil economy stand for a second. I wonder if it's you repeated a few times in your talk. It's like making profits out of mourning, and that seems kind of your motivating normative kind of concern there. But I would kind of encourage you and myself and all of us to think kind of what's really disturbing us. It's really that. So, for example, I mean, we could draw an analogy to, I mean, slavery was brought up. So, a lot of people made profits from slavery, but some were slavers, and other were, for example, people who hired freed slaves to work, with after like was abolished or partially abolished. And they also made profits, but I wouldn't, obviously, it's not the same, right? So some people, so going back to your example, like maybe they're making profits out of mourning, but first they're also creating a benefit to people, and sure, they're taking the cut, but is it bad to just because, you know, they have some profit in it? So I think maybe the underlying concern is that it might hurt some people. So some people, it might help them, maybe it might help them kind of deal with mourning and trauma, and for those cases, I'm not sure the fact that they're making profits out of it is kind of the big deal. And maybe the bigger deal is that there are a lot of people that it might be bad for them. And for me, it's like more consumer protection question. I mean, should we just like we require movie distributors to warn us if a movie is not suited for certain people based on age, for example. So maybe we need to put regulation in place that would make sure that this service will not be accessible to people who are not emotionally maybe capable, who are prone to be, you know, severely maybe increase the trauma. Like if you have an Alexa, you might know that, you know, if you ask Alexa whether she loves you, she won't give you an answer, probably because of the fear liability, but you know, there is probably also a good reason that they don't allow it, because we don't, I mean, there obviously harm possible, like that could happen to many people who might like
Fall in love with
or falsely believe that they're continuing a real relationship, but maybe for others it's good. So I personally would try to more like tailor the regulation from the understanding that it might help some, it might hurt others, maybe most, but not like I'm not really profit thing is what would concern me personally.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, there are several ways to say this. I mean, people who trade, for example, human organs, I mean, the ones who are on the other side, they will have like a case to defend those things, right? You have liberty, autonomy, profit, and so forth. I think the problem here is that this is a distortion of reality, and you're profiting from that. And secondly, is that mourning is supposed to be something natural, right? It has been, or at least something much more handcrafted. You know what I mean? Like not this artificial in that regard. So you can engage, for example, with a ghost book, which has possibly a totally different engagement to the real person, or you may create a different out of it. The question really is like, how can we like put this conversational agents in under a strict legal examination, or if not, I consider that they deserve a separate legal analysis. But at this point, I think that profiting from that specific part is problematic. For example, in the previous paper, we were discussing likes, right? So, do you think it would be alright that someone who has like 45K likes out of a memorial page is profiting because of other advertisements or something like that? It's problematic, no? Because precisely we have this normative intuition that tells you that something is not working properly there. But yeah, I mean, be sure I will take a look at it closer, because there are other ways to look and even defend a major case for those what's entrepreneurship, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
So can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
So what would you say about, like, for example, you know, in Spain, the hologram of Salvador Dali?
Yeah.
So that's also a distortion of reality, right?
Sure.
So does it disturb you, like, physically?
Yeah, the Dali hologram is done in Spain, it's in Miami, near Tampa in Florida, in the Dali Museum. It's a totally different thing, because here I'm concerned with private individuals, non-celebrity individuals who died in ordinary circumstances, let's say. And Dali, as a public image, it has another different regime, it has personality rights, or it has even in the US right of publicity at some point. So that will mean that if you are using, and this is not a ghost, but it's a deep fake that takes you through the museum, and you're using this deep fake, in my point of view, for something which is apparently good, which is culture and education, not for deceiving someone. So I think that it's a totally different example, the hologram. However interesting and deserves.
No. I'm asking not because you have opinions, because what you said as a defining features of what disturbs you, then I think you have to, like, for example, why not saying that this is also made like, a ghost book can be made for like good reason, because you give an example of someone who created, what is it, like a replica? In a benefit, like for her deceased friend, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't made in the first place to deceive anyone or as a distortion of reality or.
It has to do with the audience. For example, in the Dali Museum, the audience is the public, the wider
Yeah.
public. When you're creating a ghost book, you are developing that ghost book, taking into account the relationship with the dead, the continuing bonds, if you want to call it,
Yeah.
with the dead and the living. So it's an intimate relation that is being taken into the market as opposed to the living. In the replica case, which I tried to mention in the paper, is like developing an AI companion, an AI friend, or whatever you want to call it. Well, they have prototype the system to make it wider for customer service, let's say. But they are not commodifying like the previous relationship of that person with someone specific of the family. They are just like creating a conversational environment, if that makes sense. Oh, there are two.
Should
We talked already. Yeah, so,
There's time for everyone. You don't need to.
so a couple of questions. First, about the communication of that. And it seems to be very good. That is a fairly profitable business, not only in normalizing, but before and all that, but even the one that makes the casket, the great mausoleums. So we have a lot of money in going into memorializing and speaking to that. What's exactly the scam that there is bother you? Then why, and the question going back to that, why can't we have a relationship with Alexa? No, why isn't it real? If I'm talking with Alexa and Alexa is answering me, why isn't our relationship real? And no, I'm not done. Fine. So, and that question is, if it's breaking with private people, no, these are private people, they're not celebrities. It's not public. When the one stopping private is going to be a public person, and when and every interaction is public by definition. The only privacy is in my house. So even here now, we're all public, transferring to the world, right? So where is the line and why is the line important?
You want I can bundle a couple of.
Yeah. All right. So, Mustafa?
So I have two comments slash question. So you mentioned already Man's article, which reminds me of this 2013 Death Proof. I don't remember the author's name, but the title was Death Proof. There, the author was mostly concerned with right after death, like upon someone's death, as a survivor, I'm really prone to certain violations of certain interests. So did you consider having a time bound, like the CCHR precedent, like the more time passes, privacy expectancy decreases? So maybe you could, like, it could play a bit of a role in your. And also, I'm sure this will come as a comment in the future, or maybe it already came at some point. Like the comments I received, this on-off with commodification. Like I think there's a 2004, like early 2000s, revisiting commodification. The title is that, and even there they were criticizing this strict polarization between full commodification and. I mean, I just read it for an insight, but this is more relevant to yours, so it would be helpful. So that's that. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Mr.
Okay, so
Yeah, sure.
and then.
So firstly, just as a comment, just to let you know, if Alexa is already was already mentioned, so Amazon is working on a feature of Alexa that will enable Alexa to use voice samples of the dead, and then Alexa will speak in the voice of the person that we chose that will be Alexa's voice. So, and they have already published. So, so it's not only the question of whether Alexa will tell us that she loves us or not. It can be the person like our mothers that will speak to us and tell us that we need to buy milk or whatever. I want to try to bring in Mickey's work, which was published in Hebrew, I'm afraid.
We are waiting for the English one.
About the ways in which algorithms limit our possibilities and limit our personal choice, basically. And once algorithm will replace people in these chatbots, there will be no more machine learning of the actual persona that used to exist that will fix or redirect the bot to represent the person that has died. And it will have to rely on other people that are similar in a way, but not exactly the person. And then it will be according to various patterns, not kind of the specific person will be raised basically, and will be replaced by a pattern that is based on thousands of other activities of various other people that never knew that person that has died, but the algorithm has found that they are similar to that person one way or another. And what happens when the bot stops being like the person?
Okay, so with regards to your question, what's the difference between this industry of funerals and software and ghost? Believe it or not, it's quite easy. When someone dies, it's something real, it's something that happens in that moment, and that's it. Here you have artificial conversational agent that is deceiving someone who is not, or apparently purporting to be someone who is dead, but it's continuous. So in a funeral, you have your chance to develop, let's say, your own way of grieving, of going forward, or whatever you want to call it. But with a ghost, where you have like a continuous relationship with someone, with an entity, which is an artificial entity. And the problem is that, of course, I mean, it's a business, doing funerals and so forth. Well, the problem here, it's and this connects very well with Tal's comment. When they made this public demonstration of this Alexa feature mimicking the voice of a dead grandmother reading a story to the grandchild, it was received with enormous critique worldwide. It was not like going to a funeral. It was perceived like that with high criticism, because there's something uneasy there. Precisely, I think that I need to find the precise words and the precise components of what's troubling about it, but it's out there, and it has to do with commodifying those things. Because it's not that Alexa is giving that to you for granted or for free. I mean, they're making a profit. They are making post-collection of data out of the conversation. They are harvesting the data for different reasons. So I think that's what makes them different. And I will leave the other question for the two of you to debate. I mean, I don't want to get in there with the Alexa real. But yeah, in my point of view, you're free to do whatever you want.
Thank you.
But the other. But the element in the other end is artificial agent. So you can develop like an affection towards your car, towards whatever you want, your house, a painting. So you can do it. But the issue here is that you know that those things are those things, and they are unanimated. You know what I mean? So it's not that they have their own way of processing things and their own way of going beyond in emotions and so forth. Want to ask yourself?
No.
No, thank you. I could just a short one. I think, maybe the unease that most of us feel, it's creepy, right? At present, it's creepy. Now, like many things are that we do today, 5, 10, 20 years ago, seemed completely creepy. And would you imagine that you would be in touch with thousands of people, this or posting stupid, TikTok now. So many things, so what is today creepy may in the near future may be completely new, normal. Now, we're at the beginning, so we're still in the creepy stage, I think, for most of us. Other than those
No, I agree.
Well, I would just follow up on that briefly, that this is a long-running discussion, and I'm a long-term opponent of regulating on the basis of creepy. I don't know if we were talking about regulating. It's an argument I've had with Judith Raumhofer's work, some of you will know, for a really long time, because it is subjective and irrational, right? I mean, okay, you could say that murder is creepy and we regulate to, prohibit murder, but in most circumstances, creepiness is very subjective and very dependent on your individual psychology. And, I personally don't want to live in a society where things are regulated on the basis of creepy. I want there to be reason, whether they're economic or dignitary. But to follow up on just maybe just stressing something again, but would you be bothered? Not leave the question of regulation on the side, but would you be bothered if it was all done for free?
What do you mean? You mean like this company is doing this for?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I could be bothered by codification, okay, like codification of babies, maybe I would be bothered. I don't know why. I don't know if that's a reason for regulation, maybe I would be bothered. But is codification exactly like the problem? I mean, if it wasn't commodified, wouldn't you be bothered at all?
I'm going to change the words a little bit.
Okay.
I wouldn't be concerned. I'm not bothered.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I like cryptic things. But this kind of goes a little beyond the mark. But I mean, I wouldn't be bothered on the basis of two things. If the ghost books were made initiated by the disease before, let's say that the people have like your voice and people say I want to have it. And secondly, they work for free. I will be much less concerned. The problem is that the way that this industry is working on the absence of consent in most cases, and secondly, the profit interest, direct or indirect profit. So not only you're paying for the service, but they also may have some ways to collect and harvest the data and so forth.
But something I don't understand, I mean, technically that I'm not sure that I understand. I mean, if I want, I don't know, to speak to my deceased father, okay? So I will give the company all the data and everything. I will invite his double, right? His ghost phone.
Yeah.
Joe ghost phone. And so why do you think it's a, I mean, what is it? I mean, I asked for that. I gave all the free, I provided the company with information, right?
Yeah.
Or so
No, your example.
so
I'm saying-
this is not a bothering.
No, I'm saying that I understand what you're saying.
Okay, so you didn't mean for that kind of interactions?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that in practical terms, these companies will rarely do something without a profit, like directly or indirectly, like for benefit or for partial benefit. So what I think is concerning is precisely that they are doing this in the absence of consent most of times, and even with their consent, and that's a problem with commodification, because let's say that I want to sell you something that right now is commodified, even if you and I agree at this point, you wouldn't be able to sell it or buy it. You know what I mean? For example, human organs or human remains. You know what I mean? So that's why you have certain legal categories to protect those things. In this regard, it's very blurry because grieving is something that is not alienated, right? Grieving is something that happens to be or appears to happen on its own. So the issue of commodifying the process of grieving is what makes it complicated or problem.
Can I just maybe clarify on behalf of Mauricio, because that my understanding of the paper is much more limited than what people have asked, which is you didn't really talk about whether we should regulate this and how this paper. You were just analyzing the process or the notion of commodification of those gospels. And then we did discuss a little bit about the regulation of gospels in our own paper that will come out soon, but then that's your PhD. So yeah, I think we went a bit too far in what your paper didn't mean to achieve. But what I'm missing in this paper, and this is because of my own personal research, and William, again, will disagree, is the, when you talk about commodification of continuing bonds, I agree. What I think is missing is the commodification of immortality, or at least immortality by proxy, in the cases where not ghost bots are not created by the family or someone else, but the ghost bots are created by the person themselves, like in the theory after AI and some other services that are appearing in metaverses and elsewhere. So I think that's maybe missing, even though the literature is quite limited and quite problematic for a lot of scholars, but I think it's interesting. And the second point is, and maybe you can clarify if I missed it in your paper, when you talk about the trade in particular, I think you need to unpick the trade here, the limitations of the trade, because the trade of those of these commodities, whatever they are, is not unlimited like the trade of some other commodities. And in what way is it limited? I think that should be clarified a little bit in the paper, but that's just my suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, I'm very lucky to have Edina as my external supervisor. She clarified the scope of the paper, and definitely, yeah. I mean, I have to. This is a work in progress at this point, and I will incorporate pretty much all the comments here. Yeah, I mean, I just want to say like that I consider this to be problematic at this point, and even in the short. I don't know, possibly in a couple of decades more. Right? I mean, I understand that now talking about home office is very natural, and 50 years ago will be creepy, right? Or something. But this is something on its own worthy of a proper analysis, and that's why I've embarked on this PhD journey, studying those things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maurizio. Thank you, Vicky. So we have as much time as we want, no later than 4 o'clock. We can finish earlier for concluding comments. So I kind of scribbled a few things that I've heard over the day. I think one overarching point that I've sort of realized over the day is that we still lack the language to speak about much of this. That's why some things, you know, which is good for scholars, because then we can come up with quasi-property or other sort of notions here. Another thing, following on the creepy sort of discussion, maybe all of this is too early. Kind of maybe we are running too fast, kind of, you know, in the spirit of move fast and break things. Maybe it's too early, and we should, you know, act like the Chinese and the French, right? You know, about the French, there was a conference for 200 years of the French Revolution, and the Chinese said, you know, we haven't yet discussed the revolution that took place, I don't know, 2,000 years ago or something. I read it, right? But it's something like that. Maybe we should wait. More specifically, for the lawyers among us, and this is the law faculty here, right? Maybe the law should be kind of more modest in its aspirations and wait for other social forces to do what they do, whether it's the market forces, social norms, or various kinds of technology, to the extent that, you know, if you're a technological determinist and believe sort of in the self-power of technology. More specifically, if we do opt for the law, you know, decide, yes, we should regulate, how? Should it be just offering options and tools, default tools, of which kind? There are various options here. Personalized law, which you hinted to some extent, I think, or some other legal mechanism which we have to come up with. Either, you know, pulling out quasi-property from other places, or focusing on platforms and contracts within them, and using contract law and competition law and you know, these kinds of consumer protection law, perhaps, etc. Thoughts, comments, ideas. What are the big questions that we face, other than the specific case studies that we've heard? Yes, please.
I think like the overarching question, and I heard this in various presentations, the overarching question of how do we marry or divorce the notions of sentience, the meaning, remove the emotional aspect of humanity, and the exactness, the quantitativeness of an algorithmic nature of technology. Like it's a tension, and it's a bit of tension for
Sure.
Radio Memorial, but in today's nation, they're coming closer and closer together. ChatGPT and other things like that. Where do you draw the line? And I want to answer. That's the question I was second term between the lines.
Right, that applies to the living and the dead, right, kind of, and then the shift from life to death, obviously. Makes it more kind of, evident, this tension that you mentioned.
Hi.
Yeah.
Melvin, hi,
No.
from Latin University, IDC. We didn't really talk about this here today, but I wonder about the specific person in this map, which is the third party, not the third party of the digital product platform we talked here about today, but the person that the dead, the deceased talked to. And I wonder how we can make sure that his rights won't get hurt in any way. I don't have any good answers for this yet, but it's a good question, I think, to think about it.
Indeed, I think it came up in some of the comments about the conversation.
Yeah.
Conversational element, Monique or Chevy or
Right.
one of you has mentioned that. The conversational element there, and apparently, it's a big question, but technically it's quite easy to resolve, right? We can appoint a third, a different kind of third party, an objective external person. An estate executor, for example, not part of the family, and instruct him or her to search, go over the emails and search only emails that have to do with the bank account. Okay, and separate. Now, think how many emails you have in your email box over the years. It's not easy, but with Control F or search functions, it is doable, right? May take some time, but it's doable.
Unless the executives have family members.
So exactly, and the executive is a family member or something like that. Yes, that's another kind of challenge. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, so if we're zooming out, maybe one thing that crossed my mind is kind of interdisciplinary is everywhere.
Yeah.
And in this room, I think more than most. I mean, we have lawyers and people from communication and technology and economics. Maybe the one thing that I was missing was psychology. I think like maybe more than most, because I think yours and Paul's paper, for example, can we draw normative inferences from people's thoughts in context that are so people have such a difficult time confronting, or creepiness, that how can people benefit from such a thing, even though it's unreal, obviously. I don't know because I'm not a psychologist, but I'm kind of guessing that it's kind of lagging behind. I'm not sure they don't have a good answer, but maybe it's interesting to bring them to the discussion.
Right. So imagine or not, Taladina and Vivian definitely know, but there's a thriving community of death studies scholars, and some of them are psychologists, Ivan Casket and others. So they're part of the loop, not here in this room, that's right. But they're definitely part of the ongoing conversation about these issues, with various ideas and thoughts and etc. That's for sure.
Speaking of those, if I may advertise someone else's event, there is a Center for Death and Society in the University of Bath in England, and there is an annual conference of the Hadassah Center. And I think the deadline for submitting abstracts is end of this month.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to, and it will be an online. Yeah. And there's also, well, that expired, but there's also a death online research symposium that travels around the world and is organized in different places, universities. And that's also about this community that includes psychologists, also philosophers, HCI, many disciplines. It's a really interesting partnership.
Thank you. Let me just add that there is a concept that has emerged in the last few decades of I think also mentioned this, of deriving school of grief, that of continuing bonds that kind of pushed away the Freud's school that was about moving on. And scholars of digital psychology have blended into this discussion and showed that websites, the memorial pages, the online accounts, even the devices themselves can serve the function of continuing bonds, and that some people find relief in being able to imagine a one-sided conversation with their loved ones via technical digital technology.
And I should add, one other interdisciplinary element that is missing here is religious beliefs. Okay, some people believe that, when a person dies, it's only the beginning of something else, and some people think that when a person dies, that's it, right? So and that, that may play a lot into may have a lot into the story. Louisa?
So I'm Luisa Yarovsky. I'm a PhD student here at the university. My Professor Michal is my supervisor. And I think related to what she said about the let's zoom out and see what's the debate, what's going on, and trying to also be as interdisciplinary as possible. I think what we are living, I would say, for 30 years already, our brain didn't change, our body didn't change, but technology changed so much. And imagine before when we were children, when we were interacting, there was our social life. When we went to school, that was interaction. But after social media, we have two lives. We have the real one, and you have your profile. It's like, okay, what's on LinkedIn? How do you are in the month group, or you have a virtual persona. We couldn't even think how to describe that in 1995, right? It was that you would have two identities, one real and one real life physical world, and one virtual. And as now we're coming to AI, so it's another level that now we are seeing it's like a momentum now. It's everybody, we don't know, I think professors know it, we don't know if the student wrote by himself or he used the
All students write letters.
yeah. So it's mixing also our brain is mixing a little bit with the tool. So it's going so fast. And I think this is about the living, and we are discussing here about that. So also related to what Maurice's research, what's creepy and what's not, it's so fast, and our identity or how to relate to others and to ourselves, I think it's changing. So it's difficult to say creepy, but it's, I think if you describe Facebook for someone in 1994, they would say, this is ridiculous. Like posting selfies, why? You just go there and look at the person. And it's totally socially acceptable and normalized. And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, HR department will find you a little bit strange. And why does this person doesn't have a LinkedIn profile? And I think maybe the way we live, we're saying, oh, wow, did that, did them there, this is so creepy. But maybe it's changing, and it's so fast, it's difficult to understand.
My question about the time or chronology. Say, okay, let's maybe we jump the gun. Maybe lawyers trying to demonstrate, understand what's happening before it even happens. But the thing is that after things happen, it's always in the first. The first one in the game controls the game.
Yeah.
So, and then it's a little too late. And not just in matters of regulation. If this is not something we want, please take it out. And in how we think, technology restructures our concept. So, how can we just give technology to?
Well, we have a choice, but it's not a good one, right? So we have to cope with it. And the timing is indeed a challenge. I've mentioned that in the workshop we had the other day. One of our colleagues from law faculty, in another completely different context, speaks about the avocado law. The avocado law means unripe water. Okay, so it might be too early, too late. And capturing the exact moment is sometimes it's too late. Something, it's a challenge over there.
But there is a difference, I think, because some of the phenomena where we may think we would react too late with Facebook and Google and so forth are things that become de facto monopolies or oligopolies because of what they call networking effects, right? So maybe almost certainly we should have stopped Google swallowing up all its competitors. We should have stopped Facebook swallowing up WhatsApp and Instagram. But this is not, I think, somewhere
that involves a natural information monopoly. And what we're actually seeing at the moment is a pile of tiny companies like that guy there, right? Pursuing their passion. They're more like individual artists or individual entrepreneurs. So I think we're not in quite the same position as we were with Web 2.0.
But you know, if Google, Facebook, and the like would begin promoting their services, the legacy contact and all of those, they will be able to swallow these guys, at least, you know, to a large extent. You know,
They might, although again, the anecdotal evidence we have is that they don't see it as a seller.
Right.
They don't see it as good for their brand.
Right.
So I think the chances of that are actually low.
Right. The sense is that
It's
they
just
have
interesting to see the economic analysis.
exactly.
I might as well throw in my cri de coeur as usual. I'm not sure if that's what you want to hear, but when I started doing this work in 2006, God, it wasn't meant to, and Dina's heard this story, it wasn't meant to pivot around death. It was meant to pivot around the idea of what we did with digital objects, you know, how we conceptualize them. And I would still like to see this work put into the context of divorce and bankruptcy, right? How digital assets are distributed and acquired and commodified and all these words, right? Not just in the context of death, which anyone who's taught family law knows is one of 3 places where assets get redistributed. The other 2 being divorce or breakdown of partnership and liquidation or bankruptcy.
Future research, I think all of us in this field have a lot to do. Definitely empirical stuff is for lawyers and for non-lawyers alike is something to continue to be done because perceptions change and views change and practices change. Policy implications, of course. It's quite amazing, by the way, that you know, thus far, the United States has regulated this through the model law that Adina has discussed earlier, and very few other countries. So some of the European Union countries have extended the GDPR, and more specifically in Catalonia they have something, and in Italy they have something, and the French have something with family memory, whatever that means. And in Germany there were a couple of cases in the court, and that's it, right? Which is quite amazing because, you know, people die all over the world and digital remains is a global thing, maybe more in some countries than others, but it's a global phenomenon. And yet many countries are sort of waiting on the fence, either because, you know, they are dealing with other issues, which are more, you know, burning issues, or because they prefer to, you know, they're too early, too late. Maybe they prefer to see what's going on in other countries. The thing is, you know, comparison is always challenging because so many other cultural, religious, technological, financial, market structure, etc. Difference. That's fantastic. Any other final comments before we die? Okay. So famous last word. Once again, I would like to thank Ms. Benigozi for organizing together with Mr. the Safra Center for Ethics and the Shamgar Center for Digital Law and Innovation. Eventually, I would know that. Thank you to Miki and Neva for sharing. Thank you to the commentators, wherever you are. Some of you are still here, for amazing, thoughtful comments. Much appreciated. Thank you to the speakers, those who came from afar and those who came from Haifa, which is even what Jerusalem, right? Maybe even further away. Timeline. So Adina has mentioned the deadline to apply for the Bath Dev Center conference, which is next,
the end of the month.
the end of the month. Okay. For Israelis, we have published the call for submissions for the annual privacy conference. It will be the 10th privacy conference. So look it up, and if you don't find it, contact me. It will be wonderful if you submit proposals. For our guests, 7 o'clock at the restaurant, you should know how to get there. For the other Israelis, in 10 minutes, there will be the announcement of the Berlin case. So, yeah, that's a Supreme Court case about the minister
About the end of democracy.
Whether the minister who was convicted 3 times, including for tax evasion, can be the minister of, can be a minister.
Wow.
Okay. And interior issues, and eventually finance. So 10 minutes to the count. Thank you.